Hey, everybody, Scott here, and here's the latest episode for the Gray House educational videos. We're really going to be talking today about creating a realistic setting. And what I'm saying here is really it's all about balance. I think setting is one of those areas that a lot of authors really kind of screw up on, and it's really a missed advantage to be successful with. So let's go ahead and let's move on and let's take a look at what we're talking about here. Setting, right? This is the biggest thing that a lot of people have is that they kind of go time, place, that's about it, right? It's just the world. But we got to understand that setting's got a bigger purpose to it, right? When we're looking at this phrase like mood right there and this feelings and things like that, setting takes a lot more and really plays a bigger role in your stories. So what do we mean by setting? Well, look, setting, it's the context in which a story takes place, the story that describes the elements in which the story takes place, right? If you think about this, when we talk about the word context, we talk about maybe somebody says, well, give me an example of something, and they go, fill in the blank, and they, whatever that might be. But when you get that example, it could change depending on the context, right? It's basically, in philosophy, we talk about this all the time as well, right? You study philosophical ideas, but each of those ideas can change depending on the context. And it's because of that context that shapes the way that the characters act, that shapes the way that people behave. So what does this include? It includes time, place, and the environment. Those are the three basic ones. Pretty much, if you go back to your basic literature classes that you would have had in like high school, that's the basic elements. But here's the thing, it takes it beyond that. It goes a little bit bigger than that. And because you are a professional author, you're not going to just limit yourself to time, place, set in the environment. You want to expand on that. All the different aspects of time, all the different aspects of place. That's really going to be important because this includes everything that has to do with that social environment, right? So it's not just this blank landscape. And I think that's where most authors screw it up at. They just sort of picture like in theater where they're going to slap up a backdrop and that's it. And it's a static backdrop and it doesn't do anything. But the reality is your setting is almost a character. It's three-dimensional. It moves and adjusts with the characters. And as it moves, your characters adjust and your characters shift. It's got to work in tandem. If you look at your stories right now and your story is just sort of sitting there in this blank slate, it's not going to do much. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. So, what does the setting establish? And again, it establishes a world in which the characters interact and live. That's really a key point right there, that they're going to interact, right? That's the big word right there, is that it interacts, that they work with it. So think about like in your own house, right? If the temperature changes, do you change, right? If the thermostat is too high, do you make adjustments in how you act, how you behave? All of those pieces kind of go together. Like my daughter is a great example. When the temperature starts to get too hot, she gets irritable, right? And her emotions change simply because of that. So we've got to make those adjustments, right? Do you turn the air conditioner on? Do you open windows? If it's gloomy in your house, right? In wintertime up here in the Pacific Northwest, we deal with that with that sun disorder, right? Lack of vitamin D, right? So what do? We find ways to turn on brighter lights, open windows, open anything to change the mood and change the feeling, because that's the key. It establishes that mood and that feeling, and I always want you to be thinking about that piece. So, what is the purpose of this setting? Again, it provides that context, okay, that deals with the narration. So, what is it? Think about these things, right? Where does it take place, right? A character is going to maybe act differently at home versus the business world. So if you want to establish maybe more of a professional tone, you want to move that character into a setting that they're going to interact in that particular way. So I want you to always picture that. What's that social climate like as well? Again, think about that business world, right? If I go into an office, I'm going to have a social climate that's going to be professional, strict. We're going to have proper communication styles, things like that. And then you go to the bar, that conversation style changes again. Okay? Too often when I read stories, I see a character that acts the exact same way in every single setting, and that's not how this should be working. Okay, so either that person is not thinking about their character of how they would adapt, or that setting is not playing a big enough impact on that character. When does it take place? Again, not just simply the day of the week, not just simply a historical context. It could be like the time of day. I act differently in the morning than I would in the afternoon, than I would in the evening. Think about that for yourself. That's going to be the key thing. Always kind of come back to yourself. How would you react, right? Time of day, right? Are there events going on in the world that are going to change your behavior? During the COVID outbreak, right? That changed our attitude. That's part of our setting, right? So if you're experiencing things like that, are the tensions going to change again for the character? What about social norms? Like, how do you behave? What's the expectation? It kind of goes back to the social climate, the weather, the season, cold day, rainy day, sunny day. All of those are going to play a role. Think about how it shapes your story. What about the lighting in the room? Okay, and we just talked about that one. But if we want to, like, in a romantic evening setting, right, that's when we start talking about the candlelight, the quiet music, just maybe even the color of the tablecloths, all of those things. So that etc. in there really does mean look beyond those simple surface level ideas. And that's really going to be helping you out a lot. Okay, so I want you to think about this. I want you to consider good old Claude Monet here, right? Because we've all seen these before, but you get the idea of what we mean by setting, right? We've got his haystacks, and if you look at each of these haystacks, you look at the one on the left that's in purple or the one on the right that's all yellow, each theoretically same haystacks, right? Same exact haystacks, but the lighting itself changes the feeling, changes the mood, changes your emotion, right? So if you literally were spending time looking at the one on the left, you're going to have a different set of emotions. Biologically, you are going to get some changes probably in your brain waves and things like that versus when you look at the one in the yellow. Same one. If you picture that and you look at that same idea, think about that in your story now. Okay, if you want to create that mood, you're going to change the setting. You're going to focus in on certain things just to be able to build that. So hopefully this is making a little bit of sense for you here. Now, the big thing that we want to talk about here is creating a balance between too little and too much. Again, I see this all the time. I see people who will tell a story, but there's lacking a context. And you're like, I'm just reading dialogue. And it's almost just like listening to a radio, right? And you're like, okay, I'm hearing voices. Who cares? I'm not getting that. But if I had a little bit more, right? If you think about those early radio broadcasts, what did they do, right? They enhanced it by adding those sound effects in the back. They could have just told the story, but without those sound effects, that was the problem. But here's the key. What is needed to advance the story? That's how you decide whether it's too little or too much. Okay? Is this information maybe that you just need? I've read books in the past where maybe, especially like in historical fiction, where the author is spending so much time giving me all this historical world context, but it does nothing with the story. And you're like, you're reading this thing and you're going, come on, this is blah, 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 right? That's what we're talking about right there. So in that case, that author really needed that information for themselves. Reader doesn't need it. Also, look at it and say, is this getting in the way of advancing the story? You've probably all read stories before where you're booking along and everything great, and then all of a sudden they go through an information dump of building this world, and suddenly you just feel the speed of the story go brrr, and it just slows it down, and you're like, oh no, not again. So think about that in terms of the pacing. I want you to also think about this. What would the characters really see and pay attention to? I talk about this all the time, right? When you walk into your house, and this is a big problem, especially with first person narrative, but when you walk into your house, do you spend the time to contemplate the carpet, the piano against the wall, the dollhouse on the left side, the china, the lighting? No, you're walking in with a purpose in mind. You just got home from work, you're dumping the food on the counter, going to the bathroom, whatever that might be. That's your focus. You're not looking at anything else. So I always want you to stop and ask yourself before you write that in there, would your character truthfully and honestly have been paying attention to it? If not, it's probably a piece of the setting that could be just inserted piece by piece when you needed it, right? That's about all you need. I want you to also think about, how does the setting balance with the narration? Again, think about that balance, right? If you've got narration and dialogue, right? We talk about this also between like balancing dialogue and narration. If you have a ton of dialogue and no narration, it feels off balance. Think about the same thing with that. How much are you telling of the story versus how much are you doing with the world building? Got to find that happy medium between those. Is there a right and wrong way of doing it? No, but I want you to pay attention to it. That's the key thing here. So hopefully, again, this should be making a lot of sense to you. So, word of advice for you. This is a big one. I want you to always err on the side of caution. Less is better. Okay? Go for less, right? You don't need to go overboard describing the Italian restaurant. Honestly, that is a big pet peeve of mine. People who sit there and try to describe the pasta. And oh my gosh, the way that they describe pasta makes it sound like it's just nothing but tomato sauce with basil hunks on the top of it. There's a lot more to good pasta sauces. But less is better. Okay, don't go overboard. Only put the stuff in there as needed. Okay, it's yeah, as you need the information. You get the idea there. Okay. So, as always, hopefully all of this made some sense to you. Hopefully this is enlightening you here. But as always, here's the thing I want you to please remember to do. Number one, like this video. If you like it, make sure you like it. Okay? That's telling me whether or not you're paying attention and things like that. If it's helping you out, if I see a lot more likes, then I can push some of those ideas a little bit more. Feel free to share this video. If you're reading somebody's story in your critique group and you're realizing setting's not there, show them the video. Get them onto this video so that they can see this. Subscribe to the video series here. Remember, as soon as we hit that 1,000th subscriber, I can guarantee we're going to provide you at least a 6-month mentorship with me so I can be working with you on your stories and whatever it is. It's not representation, but I will be working with you for at least 6 months. Make sure that you follow me on social media. I'm out there on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I have a blog post. You can get all of those off of my main website at grayhouseagency.com. If you are part of a writing chapter, I do a lot of educational outreach with all of these groups. I'll provide workshops for writing chapters, and that could be virtual, it could be in person. Obviously, we got to depend on the whole COVID thing, but at least in person. You have to ask me to come to you. Articles, I'll write articles for you, do some blog posts for you. Even quick interviews. I judge contests for people. I provide critiques for your writing chapters. All of these things. Finally, if you are interested in submitting to me, please, please, please make sure you get to that website. Visit the website first. Don't just start submitting to me. Visit that website because that website's going to have all the information you need to determine whether or not I'm the right place for you. Again, remember, Gray House only represents traditional romance and women's fiction. So I want you to, that's a good place to start. Okay, so finally, just as a reminder, remember, you only fail if you stop writing. That's it. You only fail if you stop writing. I don't want you to stop writing. You keep writing, keep advancing your stories. Make sure that you email me if you got any questions, and I will see you again back here on the educational videos. Bye-bye.